I was halfway through buttering my toast when I saw it, a small cardboard box on the corner of the kitchen table. No one said anything about it being there, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. That lupin lowercase g, the way she dotted her eyes like raindrops. It was from my daughter. "Don't touch it," my wife said, not even looking up from her crossword. Her voice snapped through the room like a drawer slammed too hard. I paused, butter knife in hand, suspended over the toast like I'd forgotten what breakfast was for. "I said it's nothing," she added. "Probably junk. Leave it." There it was again. That tone. Not angry, just final. The kind of voice that builds fences, that tells you who's allowed to hope and who isn't. The toast went cold on the plate. My hand fell to my lap, and I watched her fold the newspaper with military precision. She always made sharp creases as if she could flatten life itself into submission. But my eyes drifted back to the box. It was small. Plain. No ribbons, no fanfare. But something about it felt heavier than it looked. Like it carried more than what fit inside. Like it knew. I hadn't heard from my daughter in weeks. Not since the argument. Not since that quiet Sunday when my wife said things that didn't leave bruises, only echoes. And my daughter had looked at me across the table, eyes wide, and said nothing. Not then. And now. This box. I reached out without meaning to, just to touch the corner, to make sure it was real. The cardboard was cool under my fingers. My wife slapped the paper down flat. I said, "Leave it." She didn't shout. That wasn't her way. But it still felt like a door slamming shut inside me. She left the room a few minutes later. Said something about the garden. Something about the roses needing pruning. But I didn't hear her. All I saw was the box. And the single word written on the label in her familiar, careful script. Dad. By the time I walked into the living room, the box still in plain view on the table, the house had shifted back into its usual rhythm, or the imitation of one. My wife stood by the fireplace, adjusting the angle of a photo frame like it mattered. It was the one from Emily's wedding, taken 3 years ago. My daughter in white, veil caught mid-motion by a breeze. Me in the far corner of the picture, cropped out by accident or design. "You want tea?" I asked quietly. She didn't look up. "Already made some." I nodded and walked into the kitchen anyway, needing something to do. The kettle was still warm, the mugs hanging like question marks from their hooks. I reached for the one with the faded "One Dad" on the side. The one Emily gave me when she was 10, long before she started calling me Dad like it was a favor. As I turned back toward the table, she called out, "Oh, and don't forget Greg and Susan are coming over tonight, 7 sharp. Can you make yourself scarce for a bit?" The words hit like a draft you didn't know was there until it chilled the back of your neck. "Make myself scarce?" She finally looked at me. "It's just Greg's trying to land that promotion, and Susan's very particular. It's easier if things are tidy. Quiet." I stared down into the cup as if it might answer for me. "Tidy," I repeated. She went back to adjusting the mantel. "Yes, no clutter. No open boxes on the table, please." I watched her hands brush over the picture frame again and thought how strange it was the way people rearranged memories to suit the version of the past they preferred. "I can take the box upstairs," I offered, voice low. "Or just toss it," she said. "Honestly, it's probably one of those subscription things. Emily signs up for all sorts of stuff. Vitamins, crystals. Last year she sent us a tin of powdered mushrooms." She laughed a little at that, a dismissive chuckle. I didn't laugh. I folded my hand around the mug and let the steam rise into my face. "You still haven't called her," I said, not quite meaning to. "What?" "Emily. You haven't spoken since Christmas." She shrugged. "She's busy. She'll reach out when she needs something. And that was that. The dismissal wasn't loud. It didn't wear boots or slam doors. It wore a smile and folded dish towels with practiced precision. Later, I sat on the back porch with my tea cooling in my hands. The garden needed weeding, but I didn't move. The light was changing, that quiet amber glow that used to mean something. Dinner time, stories, her small fingers tugging at my sleeve. Come see what I drew, Dad. Now it meant something else. A pause, an end of sorts. Behind me, I could hear the faint clink of dishes being put away, the sound of drawers closing, my wife humming softly, tunelessly, like the day was ordinary. But the box was still there, unopened. Not because I forgot, but because I hadn't yet decided if I wanted to know what was inside more than I feared what it might mean. The mug was gone, the one Dad mug, the one with the chipped rim and the faded red lettering. I'd left it in the sink the night before, rinsed but not washed. I always washed my own mug. That was my rhythm, my corner of the day. But this morning, when I opened the cupboard, it wasn't there. I checked the dish rack, then the dishwasher, even though we rarely used it. Then, without meaning to, I checked the trash. Nothing. I stood there a moment longer than I should have, palm resting on the counter like I needed help staying upright. It was a small thing. A mug. Just a mug. But it had been mine. I settled for one of the plain white ones. The ones my wife had bought in a set. All uniform. All replaceable. I poured the coffee, sat at the table alone. She was already in the living room, watching one of those morning talk shows where everyone laughed too much. Her laughter joined theirs, light, distant. I didn't say anything about the mug. Instead, I stared at the seat across from mine. Emily used to sit there on Sunday mornings, feet swinging beneath the chair, her cereal turning soggy as she told me about her week in dramatic detail. I used to pretend to be shocked by everything, even when she told me the same story twice. I still remember the way she'd smile when I did that, like it meant something to be listened to. That seat had been empty for years now. Breakfast was quiet. The clink of my spoon against the ceramic bowl was the only sound that belonged to me. Even the clock ticked like it didn't want to disturb anyone. When I stood to rinse the dishes, my wife called out from the other room, "Could you grab the mail? And if there's anything from the insurance company, just leave it on the counter. I'll handle it." "I can take a look." No, she said quickly, almost kindly. "It's fine. I already spoke with them last week." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. That was the way of things now. I nodded a lot. In the afternoon, I went to the garage to look for the old garden shears. The roses were starting to crawl over the trellis again. They did that every year, and every year I trimmed them back, careful not to cut too deep. But the shears were missing. Instead, I found a newer pair, still in the packaging, handle wrapped in glossy plastic. A price tag from the hardware store dangling. My wife must have bought them. She hadn't mentioned it. I stood there, holding the unopened shears in one hand, dust from the old shelf clinging to my sleeve. There was a time I would have been asked to pick them out, or at least told. Now they simply appeared, like decisions made in houses I lived in but didn't belong to. At dinner, she served salmon. I don't like salmon. Never have. But I didn't mention it. She placed the plates with care, folded napkins just so. We ate in silence, the way people do when they've run out of conversation and courtesy's the only thing left standing. When she cleared the dishes, she said, "Don't forget to take your pills." I already did. Oh, good. She didn't ask which ones. Didn't ask how I was sleeping. Didn't ask anything at all. That night, I wandered into the living room after she'd gone to bed. The lamp on the side table flickered slightly. The bulb needed replacing. I sat down slowly, the cushions sighing beneath me. And there it was, the mug. Not in the trash, not in the dishwasher, but behind a stack of magazines on the bottom shelf of the bookcase. Tucked out of sight like a souvenir someone was embarrassed to display. I held it in both hands, the chipped rim pressed against my thumb like a memory trying to get through. She hadn't thrown it away. She just put it aside, like me. I didn't say anything the next morning or the one after that, but every day since I've taken my coffee in that mug, quietly, carefully, washed it myself, dried it, put it back in the same cupboard, not tucked away, not hidden. I place it on the front row where it can be seen, even if no one looks. The first time she gave it to me, the mug, it wasn't wrapped in anything fancy. No tissue paper or ribbon, just a brown paper lunch bag folded twice at the top and sealed with a sticker that said, "Good job, Dad," in blocky red letters. I remember the way she bounded into the kitchen, all knees and elbows at 10 years old, her hair still damp from the morning shower. It was Father's Day, and she'd made me breakfast, if you could call it that. Toast with too much butter, a banana sliced at jagged angles, and a bowl of cereal already soggy from waiting too long. She placed the tray in front of me with all the ceremony of a 5-star restaurant. "Your Father's Day feast, sir," she announced, trying on a British accent and giggling halfway through. The mug sat off to the side. She waited as I took the first bite, her feet bouncing under the table like excitement needed somewhere to go. Then, with a dramatic flourish, she reached into the bag and pulled it out. Ta-da! It was clunky, white with a red handle, the "One Dad" printed slightly crooked. The letters bubble where she'd colored them in with permanent marker, and one corner of the decal had already started to peel. But it was perfect. "You made this?" I asked, though I already knew. "Ceramics class," she said proudly. "It was supposed to be a bowl, but it kinda slumped. So I made it into a mug. I figured you'd use it for coffee. You always drink coffee." "I love it," I said. "I'll use it every day." And I did. That summer, we built a birdhouse together out of scrap wood and stubborn nails. She painted it lime green and polka-dotted, said it looked like something birds would throw a party in. She started waking up early on Sundays just to sit beside me while I read the paper, her knees pulled up to her chest, sipping cocoa from a chipped cup while I drank from the mug she made. I'd read her the headlines, and we'd guess which ones were real and which ones sounded like bad movie plots. One morning, she leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered, "I hope when I grow up I marry someone who likes quiet mornings." I smiled then, that kind of smile that lives deeper than the face, the kind that feels like being seen. "Quiet mornings and bad coffee," I joked. "No," she said seriously. "Your coffee's the best. It smells like home." That was the summer before middle school, before phones and friends and her mother's sharp-edged expectations that began chipping away at her softness. But even then, she still left notes sometimes, slipped into my lunch bag. "Hope your meeting goes okay. Don't forget to breathe. Tell Mr. Wallace he smells like pickles." Years passed and the mug stayed. It survived 2 moves, 3 dishwashers, and a dozen times my wife tried to throw it out. I always retrieved it, always kept it in rotation, because it wasn't just a cup. It was a tether, a reminder of the girl who once thought my coffee smelled like home. And now, decades later, I stand in the kitchen with that same mug in my hand. The marker letters barely visible, the handle glued twice. I hold it carefully, as if it might dissolve. I haven't spoken to Emily since Christmas. We text, now and then. Polite updates, smiley faces, short and efficient. Nothing about the past, nothing about the mornings we used to share. But the box on the table, her handwriting on the label, it pulls at something old and living in me. A feeling I haven't had in a long time. Like maybe, just maybe, She remembers, too. It happened that evening, just before dusk. The light stretched long and low across the floorboards, tinting the whole house in that golden hue that used to make things feel warm, even magical. Dinner was roast chicken. Simple. Familiar. I'd seasoned it myself, just how she used to like it. Rosemary and lemon. A small gesture. One of many, unnoticed. My wife stood at the counter slicing carrots, her knife steady, her lips pressed into that habitual line she wore when focused, or when trying not to speak. I brought the chicken to the table, set out the plates, the cloth napkins she insisted on for decent meals. And, for a moment, I imagined this would be one of those rare, peaceful evenings. No sharp words. No silences bristling with things left unsaid. Just food and maybe a conversation that didn't feel like crossing a minefield. "Smells good?" I offered. She nodded. "You remember the time this time?" "I always remember," I said, softly. She didn't reply. We sat across from each other. The only sound was the soft clink of utensils against porcelain. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower buzzed. The neighbor's teenager, probably. Life going on in houses where people still talked. Halfway through the meal, I cleared my throat. "I got a package today," I said carefully. She didn't look up. "Oh? From Emily?" That made her pause, just a flicker. Her fork hovered midair. Then she set it down, wiped her mouth with a napkin. "I saw it on the table," she said. "I told you not to bother with it." "I haven't opened it," I lied, watching her face closely. "Good," she said, standing to take her plate to the sink. "It's probably nothing." And just like that, the moment folded in on itself. I sat there, still holding my fork, chicken gone cold. She didn't ask what was in it, didn't wonder why Emily had sent something out of the blue. She simply rinsed her plate and moved on, as if my small hope that maybe we'd talk about our daughter, maybe we'd sit side by side with the note and try to understand, was just another old dish to be scraped clean and forgotten. I looked down at my hands. The skin was thinner now, the veins more pronounced. They used to be stronger. They used to be asked for things. I thought about bringing up the apartment, the address Emily had written in her note, just to see her face when I said she gave me a key. But something in me knew what her expression would be. Not fear, not guilt, dismissal. The same kind that had crept into our lives over years of unspoken grievances and clipped good nights. The kind that quietly rewrites history with convenience and control. Later, as I stood at the sink, washing the dishes, both plates, both glasses, she passed behind me and said, "Greg and Susan rescheduled. They're coming this weekend instead." "Oh," I said. "Should I plan to be out again?" She didn't answer, just tapped her fingers lightly on the countertop and walked out of the room. That was the moment. Not a fight, not a slammed door, just the weight of being unnecessary, of being considered something that needed managing, like dust on the shelves or noise during a phone call. I finished the dishes, dried my hands on the towel she kept neatly folded on the oven handle. Then I walked into the hallway, opened the drawer, took out the box, and held the key. The note still sat inside, folded small. I didn't reread it. I didn't have to. Her words had already taken root in my memory. "When you're ready, don't tell Mom." My wife's voice carried from the other room. Something about the thermostat. I didn't catch the words. I stood there in the hallway, in the soft, failing light, and realized the hope I'd clung to. The fragile, ridiculous hope that maybe tonight she'd ask about the box or what I wanted or what I missed had quietly gone out, and in its place something else began to stir. Not anger, not yet. Just the sense that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to keep waiting. It was past midnight when I finally let the silence in. The kind of silence that doesn't soothe. The kind that hums in your ears like a reminder. You're alone. You've been alone. You're just now noticing. I sat in the den, in the armchair no one else ever used. The one I'd moved from room to room over the years as if giving it a new corner might give it purpose again. Much like myself. The lamp buzzed faintly. A low, uneven flicker. I hadn't replaced the bulb. I didn't see the point. The mug sat on the end table cold now, a ring of dry coffee, clinging to the bottom like sediment. My fingers still wrapped around it, though there was nothing left to hold. I'd stopped watching the time hours ago. The clock on the wall had ticked past 12 without acknowledgement. No cards, no texts, no calls, not even a thought from the woman down the hall curled up on her side of the bed, dreaming whatever dreams people dream when they're unbothered by absence. She hadn't asked if I was coming to bed. I hadn't told her I wasn't. I stared at the box on my lap for a long time before I opened it again. Velvet, a small, rich blue, the kind you usually find in jewelry stores. Things that carry meaning, things people save for. I opened the lid slowly. The key glinted under the dim lamplight. Brass. Ornate, but used. Like it had already unlocked something for someone else. A second life, maybe. A quiet exit. A chance. Beside it, the note. I unfolded it again, even though I'd memorized every word. Dad, when you're ready, this is for you. Apartment 3B. Don't tell Mom. I read it once more anyway, not for clarity, for company. I sat back, note in one hand, key in the other, and let the truth settle where hope used to live. I was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. No, this was older, deeper. The kind of tired that grows like rust. Slowly, silently, until you can't remember what it felt like to move freely. To be seen without needing to make noise. To be loved without having to earn it again and again. And in that stillness, something shifted. Not dramatically. Not even noticeably unless you were inside me, but something closed. A door, maybe. A chapter. Or just an old wound realizing it would never be acknowledged and deciding it was done waiting. My eyes drifted to the bookshelf across the room. On the bottom shelf, behind old manuals and untouched cookbooks, sat an old wooden model ship. Emily had given it to me when she was 12, said it was for adventuring, because I always said I'd sail someday. The sails had yellowed over time. One had collapsed in on itself, and the hull had a long, faint crack from when we moved last. But it still stood upright, stern pointed, slightly askew, a ship going nowhere. I'd once placed it there to remind myself of possibility. Tonight it looked like mockery. I stared at it a long time, the way one stares at a grave. My hands felt heavy, my chest heavier. I stood, slowly, like my bones weren't sure if they wanted to cooperate. The mug, the note, the key, I carried all three. At the kitchen sink I rinsed the mug, carefully, like it mattered. Then I dried it, and placed it, not in the cupboard this time, but back on the counter, where she'd see it in the morning, where no one could pretend it didn't exist. Then I walked to the hallway mirror, stared at the face looking back at me, lined, tired, familiar and foreign at once. And for the first time I whispered the thought I hadn't dared give breath to. I don't think anyone sees me anymore. My reflection didn't argue. Morning came like it always did, pale and indifferent, sunlight filtering through the curtains in faint lines. The house smelled faintly of toast. My wife moved through the kitchen, humming something tuneless, her slippers brushing the tile like ghosts. I sat at the table, already dressed, already waiting. Not for breakfast, not for her, for clarity. The mug sat on the counter, exactly where I'd left it the night before. She hadn't touched it, hadn't asked, hadn't even moved it aside to make space for her glass of grapefruit juice. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, watched the way her hand grazed the rim of the sink, the way she adjusted the curtains, flicked through the mail, all without looking at me. She passed the mug twice, didn't acknowledge it, didn't acknowledge me. Something inside me stilled, not with sadness this time, but with precision, with purpose, the kind of stillness a decision brings. I picked up the mug slowly, cradled it in my hands the way I used to cradle my daughter's head when she cried herself sick in the middle of the night. I thought about how small she used to feel, how large her trust was, how natural it had once been to love, to be loved in return. I set the mug back down, not quietly but deliberately, a soft ceramic thud that broke the hush of the room. My wife looked over briefly, not at me, at the sound. Then she turned back to her newspaper. That was it. That was the moment. Something inside me, something soft and waiting, folded itself away like a letter returned to its envelope. Not out of defeat, but out of clarity. I stood. "No errands today," I said, voice level. She barely blinked. "What?" I said, "I won't be running errands today." I didn't wait for her reply. I walked into the hall and opened the small drawer near the door, the one with the batteries, the loose change, the expired coupons. Beneath the clutter, the velvet box still sat, exactly as I'd left it. I opened it again, not to marvel at the key, but to claim it. It felt heavier now, not like a burden, but like an anchor, like something meant to keep me steady as I let go of a life I'd been treading water in for too long. I folded the note once more and slid it into my breast pocket. Then I walked back to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee into the one dad mug, chipped rim and all, and sipped. It was too strong, a little bitter, but I drank it anyway. She passed by again, glancing at the mug, then at me. Her eyes flickered with something, maybe confusion, maybe disapproval, maybe nothing at all. I didn't flinch, I didn't speak, because deep down I had already left. Not physically, not yet. But a part of me, the part that had waited to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be enough, had stepped out the door and found something resembling air. I would go to apartment 3B, not out of spite, but because someone still believed I deserved a key. The sky was ink blue when I stepped out the front door. No suitcase, no farewell note, no dramatics, just the key in my pocket and my coat buttoned to the top. The porch light buzzed faintly behind me as I stepped down onto the walk. Dew clung to the grass and the concrete was cool under my soles. The kind of cool that wakes you up. Not just your body, your knowing. I hadn't walked at night in years. Not alone. Not without errands or excuses. But this wasn't an errand. This was something else. Apartment 3B was 8 blocks away, tucked between a shuttered laundromat and a bakery that always smelled of cinnamon and yeast, even when it was closed. I'd mapped it that morning in my mind, tracing the route like a child preparing for a secret adventure. Each step felt deliberate, clean, like I was walking out of someone else's script and into a version of myself I'd nearly forgotten. The streets were mostly empty, porch lights here and there, the soft hum of televisions behind thin curtains. A dog barked once, then fell quiet. The world didn't notice me, but I noticed me. That mattered. At the corner, I passed a little bookstore with a chalkboard sign outside. "You're never too old to start a new chapter." I paused, staring at the smudged handwriting, and smiled. When I reached the building, I stood at the door for a moment, letting my breath settle. My fingers brushed the brass key in my coat pocket, warm from my palm. The entryway was dim, but clean. Pale blue paint on the walls, a faint smell of lemon cleaner and old linoleum. The stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed, but they held me. They held me. At the third-floor landing, I turned left. Apartment 3B. A plain door. No wreath. No doormat. But the number was written in delicate gold paint. Carefully done, lovingly even. I slid the key into the lock. It turned without resistance. The door opened with a soft sigh. Inside, quiet. Not empty, but quiet. The walls were painted a warm ivory, soft light spilling from a small table lamp near the window. The curtains were pulled back, revealing the glow of the city beyond. Not the chaos, but the calm hum of light still burning while the rest of the world slept. There was a small couch in soft gray fabric, a bookshelf filled with worn paperbacks, and on the table a frame. My heart caught in my chest. It was the photo. From the summer, she gave me the mug. Her legs dangling off the back deck, my arms slung around her shoulders, both of us squinting into the sun like we had all the time in the world. Beside it, a letter, handwritten. Dad, if you're reading this, you came. This place is yours. I've been saving for it slowly. I know it's small, but it's clean, it's quiet, it's yours. I've seen the way things are. You don't have to explain. You don't even have to stay. But if you ever need space that belongs only to you, space where no one tells you to disappear, this is it. No strings. Just love. M. I read it twice. Then I sat on the couch and let the quiet fill me. But it wasn't the same quiet as home. This one didn't erase me. This quiet held me. I ran my hand over the armrest. Soft, sturdy fabric. Real, present. I looked at the framed photo again. We were both younger, but I remembered that moment. I remembered the laughter, the ease, the way she had leaned into me like I was the safest place on earth. And maybe, for a time, I had been. Now, she was offering the same back. I took the key from my pocket and placed it gently on the table beside the letter. Not because I was leaving it behind, but because it no longer had to stay hidden. I had the choice now. And somehow, that was everything. The next morning, I rose early. Not because I had to. Not because the day demanded it. But because I wanted the quiet before she woke. That thin, fragile space between sleep and routine, where truth sometimes finds a way through the cracks. I brewed the coffee slowly, the way I always had. 2 scoops, level. Water just under boiling. The same steps I'd followed every day for years. Not out of habit, but devotion. Ritual, even. The One Dad mug waited on the counter just where I'd left it. I picked it up and held it to the light. The chip on the rim caught the morning sun, casting a crooked shadow on the tile. The red lettering, once bold, had faded to a dusky rose. But it still read the same, if you squinted just right. I poured the coffee, took one slow sip. Then I placed the mug, carefully, gently, in the center of the kitchen table. No coaster, no note, just the mug. And beside it, I set the box. Velvet, slightly worn, but intact. I left the lid open, the key resting in full view, a glint of brass catching the light. A silent declaration. Not loud, not angry. Just final. She came into the kitchen minutes later, slippers quiet against the floor. Her eyes were still adjusting to the light. She didn't see me at first. Just moved toward the kettle, the drawer, her usual rhythm. Then she stopped. Saw the table, the mug, the box, the key. I watched her from the doorway, hidden behind the edge of the hall. Not to be cruel. I just didn't want to speak. Words were too small for what this was. She stared at the objects, head tilted just slightly. Her hand hovered above the table, not quite touching anything. Her mouth opened, then closed again. I stepped back down the hall. Slowly, quietly, let her sit with it. I wasn't leaving yet, but I wasn't waiting anymore either. No more asking for room at the table I set. No more shrinking myself to fit her comfort. I walked to the porch and sat in the morning air. It was cool, a breeze teasing the hem of my sleeves, and in my chest something loosened. Not quite relief, but something close. Behind me, the house stayed silent. She didn't come out. She didn't call my name. She didn't have to. The mug said it all. And this time, it wasn't a plea. It was a goodbye. Not from the house, not even from her, but from the part of me that thought love had to come with silence. The following week passed with little fanfare. She didn't mention the key, didn't ask about the box or the mug, but she never moved them either. They stayed on the table for 3 days, untouched, undeniable, until one afternoon, they were gone. I found the box back in the drawer, the mug in the cupboard, tucked behind the newer ones. Nothing was said, but something was heard, and that was enough. I didn't confront her. I didn't explain. The gesture wasn't meant to start a fight. It was meant to end a silence, not between us, but within me. I kept walking every morning now, 8 blocks past the bakery and the bookstore with its chalkboard sign that changed daily. Some doors open inward, some open out. I never stayed long in apartment 3B, but each visit left a trace. A book rearranged on the shelf, a towel hung in the bathroom, a packet of tea added to the drawer. I was building something slowly. Not a second life, not an escape, just space. A place where I didn't have to ask permission to exist. And with each visit, I carried something small. A photo from the house, a pair of reading glasses. A sweater Emily had once said made me look cozy, but capable. Each item moved without fanfare. No suitcases, no boxes, no announcement. A quiet exhale stretched over days. One morning I brought the mug. I placed it in the new apartment's cupboard. Not behind anything, not hidden. Right at the front, beside a single saucer and a spoon with a crooked neck. That evening, I sat by the window. The city buzzed below, not loudly, but just enough to remind me that the world still turned, that I still had a place in it. I thought about Emily. I hadn't called her yet. I would. But not to thank her. That letter wasn't charity. It was love. And love, when it's real, doesn't need gratitude. It just needs presence. I looked around the apartment. Small, warm, enough. There was no television, just a radio I'd picked up from a thrift store on my 3rd walk over. It crackled with old jazz and stories told by voices older than mine. I closed my eyes and listened. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something or someone. I was simply there. And that was enough. Later, when the sun began to dip, I poured myself a cup of coffee. Not from the fancy machine at home. Just a kettle, a scoop of grounds, a quiet ritual. I reached for the mug. The letters were nearly gone now. One dad. You could barely see them unless you tilted it just so in the light. But I knew they were there. I could feel them. And as I held the warmth in my hands, I thought about that summer morning on the deck. The toast, the banana, her wild hair and wild heart. You always drink coffee, she'd said. So I made you something for your coffee. And she had, then and now. Out the window, the sky was awash in soft gold, the kind of light that makes everything, even the chipped and faded, look holy. I took a sip and smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was no longer afraid to belong to myself. Fade to black. The mug sits alone on the table, empty now, catching the last of the sunset in its fading red letters. The end.